And she said, we are bringing really, really dangerous people to this neighborhood. They are not. Well, if you'll give me just a chance, please. Statistically, people living with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major clinical depression, if you control for primary family members, rule primary family members out, mother, father, brother, sister, husband, wife, an assault on a stranger, they are far less assaultive than people who are not mentally ill. You are much more likely to be assaulted by someone who's not living with mental illness than you are being assaulted by. One of the things that I think is a problem with the perception of mental illness, at least my experience here in Seattle, about the only time you hear about mental illness is when you pick up the paper or turn on a TV news channel, and last December a mentally ill man killed another person with a hatchet. 2 years ago, a mentally ill man up in Skagit County got a rifle and shot indiscriminately 6 people, killing 4 of them. What you hear about are the tragedies associated with untreated mental illness. You don't hear stories about the thousands of Washington citizens that are living with major mental disorders that never do any of that kind of thing. And so our tendency, unless you work in this field and know some of this, is to think every mentally ill person is dangerous, and that's simply not the case. Yes, sir?
We have a lack of services in this neighborhood already. How do you intend to provide for the folks who would be living there?
I've seen that in the blog.
And question 2, do you intend to house sex offenders there?
Okay, good question. I've seen that about concern for services such as transportation and grocery stores and whatnot, and I'm very happy that you're concerned about chronic homeless people getting their needs met. We will be serving 2 meals a day in the project, plus a continental meal. We will have at least 1 van associated with the project. Our agenda ultimately is to teach people how to prepare meals in their own rooms. The type of housing that we do are studio or efficiency apartments that have full kitchens and full bathrooms in them. So our ultimate agenda is to try to teach people how to prepare their own meal. But to make sure that they're getting good food, we'll be serving pretty much 3 times a day. There's a continental breakfast that the staff prepare. We will have a catered meal in the evening from Fair Start, and we always are making sandwiches for people at lunchtime. But ultimately what we want them to do is recall what it's like to go to a grocery store, a real supermarket, not a convenience store. And I mean no disrespect to convenience stores, but our folks, in their living on the street, that's basically been where they bought their food. It's expensive and it's not particularly nutritionally balanced. And we want to correct that behavior, but it takes time to do that. Part of what we do in our program in the building is teach activities of daily living, things that all of us in this room take for granted. A major component of that is meal preparation. Transportation, we will handle ourselves. So, sex offenders. You guys don't want sex offenders. We'll commit not to bring sex offenders here. But I can't help but say something about that. Where do sex offenders live?
Well, they don't need to live 1 block away from the school.
And when would they live?
Yes, but our basic tendency has been in this community, maybe not in this neighborhood, but I've seen it in other neighborhoods, is go on the sheriff's website, look up the sex offender page, find out how many sex offenders are on your block, identify them and drive them out.
Are residents required to take their meds?
No, they're not. Let me finish with the sex offender and come back to that question. They are, many of them get driven to the street, and we're not one bit safer as a community when they're homeless and unsupervised. But I understand there's another myth that suggests that there's homeless, mentally ill people somehow are sex predators. There's no correlation.
I I wasn't making that correlation.
the
I don't
incident-
think any of us are making that
It's
correlation.
possible for somebody to be both.
It's possible for somebody to be both. It is. But if you guys don't want it, we won't have it. This gentleman had a question, and I stepped on it.
Me?
No, this,
Oh,
no,
oh,
this,
he's asking
about
this
the-
gentleman was right
As a
on line
requirement,
with me.
yeah, requirement of residency is they don't, it's not mandatory that
Yeah.
anyone has to.
It is not
medication.
Because you would specifically, when you were talking about mental health, you were specifically saying treated mental illness.
Mhm. I
You were
was.
specifically talking about people that were actually on their meds.
Mhm.
So you're saying that people that do not take their medication
That's
will
right.
be evicted from the property?
No, I'm not
So
saying,
that we don't have to deal with that as a community?
I'm not saying that.
Oh, so you're not saying?
Would you let me finish?
Please.
And, okay, we have learned over the years that coercing medication simply does not work.
So they have no place in your facility?
Yes.
Well,
They have
I
only
disagree
labs.
with you.
You can get killed
They
by
do
this.
have a place in our facility because they're connected with clinical social workers in our facility, and we're trying to help them discover techniques of symptom management. And part of that technique involves taking medications, but not compelling them to take medications. We have no authority to compel medications. The only people in this county that can compel someone to take meds are the population I just described, the DMHPs. Yes, yes, ma'am.